Chapter 26, City Lord's Palace. Afterwards, Broly was announced the champion of the tournament. Afterwards, the ranks were announced for the top 10, as they had been fighting for it in the breaks between the rounds. 10. A's, the Saiyan with 5 credit points. 9. Biko, the Hera with 10 CP. 8. Yenari, the Harpy with 15 CP. 7. Noid, the Hera with 20 CP. 6. Taro, the Saiyan with 25 CP. 5. Blitz, the Wolfman with 45 CP. 4. Atrog, the Troll with 55 CP. 3. Aaliyah, the Saiyan with 75 CP. 2. Zinjo, the Myrmidon with 100 CP. 1. Broly, the Saiyan with 150 CP. After the tournament, those 10 would be disciples under the City Lord. It was also announced that every 2 years would be another tournament for another chance, but this wouldn't affect the already chosen top 10. The win against Zinjo was naturally seen by Kana, who was awakened by the loud noise and the rumbling because of the last fight. She resented that Broly won the tournament as she thought he wasn't worthy of the title of the strongest prodigy of her generation. He was only ahead of her now. With time, she would surely surpass him. Aaliyah was there when she awoke and tried to calm and comfort Kana, but with her red eyes, it looked like she tried more to console herself than Kana. She had trained her whole life after all, while being praised as the best. Because of the position of her father Daz and the fact that she wants to become their race leader, she was okay with Broly defeating her, but against Zinjo, she felt that she had dishonored her race. If she wanted to become the leader of the Saiyans, she had to be stronger. So, she renewed her conviction to work even harder. Although A's got less CP, he was satisfied in becoming a disciple and barely at that. Taro obviously expected more, and by being defeated by the champion, he took his loss to motivate him even more. 3 days later, the Saiyan group was already packed and ready to move to the City Lord's place, beginning their training. On the way towards the City Lord's palace, the Saiyan group coincidentally met Zinjo on the way. Zinjo turned to them and looked at Broly. Broly, I wanted to say sorry about what happened in the tournament. After Zyrd woke up, he told me that he provoked you for being different than the other Saiyans, so he kind of had it coming. Zyrd wouldn't have made it to the top 10 anyway. Broly stared at him for a second before responding.
No worries.
Well, there is still the conflict between our races, so we would have clashed even if he hadn't deliberately provoked me. You care about that? You don't? Broly becoming puzzled as he remembered Zyrd being rather hostile towards him since the start. Broly thought it had something to do with the conflict between them, even though he himself didn't know about the conflict itself. Well, it's only about the privileges of the fruit of life and the land you got. Actually, only the higher-ups are upset about that. Most of us don't really care. Yeah. Zyrd was just really nervous and tried to hide it by being over-aggressive. Wait, so, I crushed him because he was a nervous train wreck? Oh god. No wonder he vomited all over the place. Don't worry, it was his own fault after all. Although many of us were infuriated by the way you handled him, but Zyrd took full fault for it and calmed the rest down. I think it is the best if we just have a fresh start, the two of us at least. Forget about the tournament and start anew? Sure, why not? Broly answered as he grasped Zinjo's outstretched hand. He was feeling slightly guilty how he humiliated Zyrd, so it would be best just to accept this proposal of peace. The 10 were gathered on an open court, standing in front of the City Lord waiting for him to speak. Now you have proven yourself to be the strongest of your race and among the other races. You should be proud to achieve your level of strength at your tender age. Of course, this is not the limit of your capabilities. As my disciples and the future pillars of this planet, it is my duty to train you within the best of my ability. But, I'm no saint. You will have to work for the technique I have arduously created throughout my life. Most of those techniques, however, are manuals that I found when I was out in space-seeking adventures. That is where the credit points take in their purpose. In the library to your left will be those techniques where you can exchange them if you have enough CP. On your right are the training rooms, where I will be holding general classes every morning for 4 hours. You can also always ask me about problems you might have. It is not restricted by the classes. Behind me are your rooms and the canteen. We will start tomorrow. You can have a look around and settle in today. As he said that, they all went around to have a look. First, they claimed their rooms. They were all 80 square meters big, with one room for their bed and another for the toilet. Apparently, they also had an open-air hot spring bath they shared. The training rooms were more than enough for everyone to claim one, and it seemed like that was indeed the intention as all the keys were open for one to take. It appeared like the rooms were made of Kachin, one of the strongest metals in the universe, as it was entirely black. Well, this was what Broly concluded as he punched the walls and nearly breaking his hand in the process. After settling their stuff, they went to the library. They were greeted with hundreds of books. Astonishing considering that this was the City Lord's personal collection. It seemed that the City Lord was a collector. They started to browse through the books and only saw a summary of the technique and the amount of CP they would need to exchange of it. They were all divided into ranks from F to A, with F being the lowest and A being the highest. There were also different categories for different applications like movement dash, attack dash, defense skills. While they were looking through the books, they realized that many of the lower rank books described how to send out ki beams. But why would there be so many books to describe the same thing over again? For a few hours, they looked through the books, until most had already their eyes on a few techniques they wanted to learn. They were eager to exchange for them, but the librarian, Ahara, told them to at least wait for a few months, so they wouldn't hastily waste their CP. Broly also had few books he was interested in. Key attacks that he saw in the series back in his past life, like the Spirit Sword, a blade-shaped energy wave technique used by Vegito, or the rapid movement skill to increase the speed for dodging or to create afterimages. If Broly could, he would want to learn everything, but as he saw the amount of CP needed, he quickly lost hope. But of course he would heed the advice of the librarian and see what the City Lord would teach.
W chapter 27, Key Cultivation.
The next day, the City Lord gave his first lesson, and it flabbergasted all of them with the exception of Atrog and Broly. The lesson was about the pathways of the so-called meridians, who run through their whole body, transporting the ki where they wanted it to be. It was so surprising for them because they didn't know those paths existed. It just came natural to them. On second thought, there had to be some way to guide your energy through your body. After thinking that way, they quickly recovered from their initial shock. But for Atrog, it was no surprise, as a troll, which are not genetically gifted for ki usage, trained and used his unusual intelligence to find those pathways and control his ki. Broly, on the other hand, was somewhat aware of meridians through his past life experience. He remembered reading novels about those kinds of cultivators. They learned that using ki from many races is a difficult thing, having to train arduously to be able to use it throughout the body, hence most aren't even aware of them and are using cannons to fight. The City Lord went on with how to meditate to increase their ki and gain a feel for the meridians. It wasn't long before the lesson was over, and the kids were in deep thoughts. The City Lord told them that they had to study their meridians on their own, since every person and race was a bit different. They would just need to circulate their ki throughout the body and try to feel the pathways. They needed to develop an inner eye. By learning where exactly the meridians are, coupled with their natural affinity to it, they would gain a much higher degree of control. This would allow them to learn techniques even faster. The second point in this lesson was like a wake-up call for Broly. The City Lord reminded them to train their body to be at least on par with the ki they accumulated. By training their body, they could increase their ki, since the body is essential a vessel for it. If they only meditate, it would fill their body to the brim, and they would be stuck at that level for some time. Ki has an ability to strengthen your body to a degree, and with time your body would be able to handle more ki. But meditation coupled with physical training, the strengthening process would accelerate by many times. So, they were advised to balance their training, as it would be the fastest way to increase their overall strength. When Broly heard that, he decided to ask some question after the lesson to clarify some thoughts he had. After the others went to the training rooms, Broly went up to the City Lord and asked, "Can some people automatically accumulate ki without meditation?" "Oh, you have questions? Let me think. Not that I have heard of. After most reach adulthood, they have a consistent level of ki, if they don't use it. But using ki in battle, for example, strains the body. Over time, the body adapts to the usage, and their ki reserves increases. That's how most increase their ki and strength. But just by using it, the ki in the body only grows slowly. Therefore, it is clever to meditate to increase your ki and then use it in battle or train your body to adapt to this new power." As I thought, that somewhat explains the Zenkai boost. As it was said in the series, the body will imprint on the injuries. After having survived a lethal wound, the body strengthens to the point it could receive the same attack which caused the wound, therefore automatically increasing the upper limit of ki they can store, and the Senzu Bean just filled Goku and the rest up with energy. What happens if the ki constantly increases to the point it would overflow? Overflow? Before overflowing, it would probably go rampage in the body, trying to reach every part of your body. It would mess with your head until it destroys all your organs. Ki has strengthening properties, but too much would just destroy the cells as they wouldn't be able to hold the energy, essentially bursting out of the cells until it would overflow to the surroundings. You would need to quickly use up the excessive energy, which would defuse the problem for a moment, but to solve it, you would still have to excessively train your body to offset the imbalance. F*CK me. That's why Broly in the series was such a maniac. Having his ki suppressed probably messed with his brain, as his ki still grew, but couldn't release it unless Paragus let him. Are there any techniques for body strengthening? Since the questions pointed to the same thing, it dawned to the City Lord why Broly asked him all those questions. A 3-year-old winning a tournament against other races, most of them 5 years older than him, it should be obvious that his body was unique. Broly, you probably realized after I told you how dangerous that kind of body type is. We need to do something, the earlier the better. I have a feeling that only strengthening your body wouldn't be enough. Come here for a second. I will envelop you with my ki and try to sense your ki as best as I can. I have to get a better understanding of your ki before I can help you. Broly knew he wouldn't be able to solve this easily on his own. The City Lord was the best in controlling ki. With his experience, he would be able to help Broly understand his situation better, maybe even solve his predicament. All right, I will be in your care. The City Lord enveloped Broly with his bluish aura. All right, stop suppressing your power. After Broly stopped his suppression, the City Lord could clearly feel Broly's ki. Now power up to your fullest. Broly's ki instantly flared up, pushing the ki of the City Lord outward. For 10 minutes, the City Lord asked Broly to control his ki in different ways. The more the City Lord observed, the worse his face became. All right, that's enough. So, how is it? Chapter 28. The Problem. It's bad. Your ki is chaotic and violent. It not only increases rapidly, but the very nature of your ki is problematic. Ki is part of oneself, but yours strangely rebels against your control. That's why all new ki is trying to destroy your body before you can rein it in. As I suspected, even if you were able to constantly strengthen your body to match your ki, the ki would always struggle against you. So first you have to be able to make it truly your own. Then we can fix your constant increase problem. But why would it rebel against me? Again, with my ki. I thought I already had it under control when I fused the fragments in me. Seems like I somehow messed up. But how? I don't know, but that's exactly what you need to find out to make it your own. You have to trace it back until you find the problem. Try to circulate your ki into the depths where you don't have any control. You should be able to find the source of it. As the City Lord said, Broly sat cross-legged onto the ground and circulate his ki throughout his body until he met resistance. It was in the center of his body where he fused the fragments. He could only vaguely perceive what his center was. It shined in a green light and sent out energy which attacked the cells in his body. The ones who survived the attack started shining from the energy in a green hue. He could tell that those were undergoing a mutation. They were giving off a tremendous amount of power as they evolved. Those were his S cells. No wonder other Saiyans wouldn't be able to achieve this form, since the cells needed were completely different. If my ki wasn't so violent, there would be probably much more cells brimming with energy, mutating into S cells. Now it also makes sense why Saiyans with a gentle spirit had more S cells. Their ki wouldn't be so violent and the cells could take in the energy easier, and the reason stronger Saiyans had more was that their whole body was brimming with ki. With a higher amount of ki, a mutation would be inevitable. Explains why I still aren't a Super Saiyan. Well, at least I can fix it now. Broly tried to send more into it, but it was like he threw an egg against a brick wall. All of his ki was annihilated the moment it came into contact with the center. 2 days later, he still tried to pry deeper into his center, but he couldn't make any progress, no matter what method he used. He was currently sitting cross-legged in one of the trainings room with 200 G. Surprisingly, it possessed a gravity chamber which went up to 1000 G if you based the measurements on the gravity of Earth. Anyhow, he was contemplating about how to get into the center and rein it in. If he succeeded, he wouldn't have to worry about the destructive nature of his ki. He could then concentrate on training his body to prevent the ki to overflow and work on becoming a Super Saiyan. As he was thinking, he thought about ways to get into the source. Suddenly it hit him. The very first lesson from the City Lord was about increasing your ki by meditation. Since Broly never needed to increase his ki manually, he dismissed this method, but it was simple actually. He didn't have to move his ki into the source, but could just generate his own ki inside the source. With that in mind, he went on to increase his ki via meditation and tried to use his inner eye to perceive what the problem is. Although he wasn't very proficient with his inner eye, he could vaguely make some things out. He perceived 3 different parts in his center. One part was the constantly growing green energy which was trashing around as it flew out of the center. Another part was a black pearl, completely unfazed by the violent green energy. It wasn't giving off any kind of aura, but it was still undoubtedly there, and Broly was somehow aware of it. And lastly, his energy as it increased at a moderate pace, but the moment it made contact with the green energy, it seemed to be devoured by it until he lost the connection. Phew. It seemed I didn't do a good job fusing the fragments after my birth. Rather than fusing, I only encased them into my center. Apparently, the original soul still has a remnant inside. The black pearl is probably something from the darkness, and I myself have basically no control of this place. Undoubtedly, the original soul and mind tried to fight over control. In the end, I managed to imprison the remnant and basically gave it control over the inner workings of my ki. Great. It originates from the remnant, making it foreign ki. No wonder it starts to destroy my cells. Fortunately, it doesn't have control outside of it. I can rein the ki slowly in. The only reason why my cells can even absorb them is likely due to the toughness of a Saiyan. And what about the pearl? Arg. I can't tell. I will have to deal with my current problems first. As it doesn't do anything, it is not important right now. I have to figure out how to take over control. Maybe I will just do the same that the remnant did and devour him. The next few weeks, Broly went on with the same routine. He woke up, attended the lessons, as there may be other useful knowledge to help him. After that, he spent the whole time in the gravity chamber in meditation. Only ever came out to eat for dinner. As a surprise for Broly, he saw Kana and Dremo, the Draco, in class as well. It seemed that the City Lord had taken liberty to take 2 more disciples, as he would have taken in Biko and Noid from his own race anyway. He thought it would be good to take in 2 more good seedlings. Kana, of course, fell into that category as her power level jumped up for a short moment in one of her fights, garnering the City Lord's interest. Broly was getting more and more pissed at Kana. It only inflated Kana's ego since the City Lord had taken her in regardless of the result of the tournament. It only fed the idea that she was something special. It didn't help her ego that she was getting stronger through the teachings as well. The others still had a good relationship with her, as they thought she was joking around like Broly or Taro. Broly knew that that wasn't the case, but right now he had more important problems than a brat. Chapter 29. Good Progress. 1 month later, Broly was sitting cross-legged in the trainings chamber under the pressure of 300 G. He was sweating all over his body, but not because of the gravity but by the fight he currently had. A fight over control. The energy was violent and chaotic, but it didn't specifically aim for him, so he could, to a certain extent, expand his influence in the center. He couldn't devour the ki as it was just too domineering and would immediately overwhelm him. So instead of brute force his way, he moved his ki in a circular manner until it behaved like a tornado, ripping tiny pieces of the energy and gained control over it. But as soon as a bigger ray of energy entered the tornado, it completely dispersed and took over the energy. It seemed he had the right technique to deal with the remnant, but Broly's generated ki was too weak. After a week since he started to use that method, he concentrated his energy, making it much denser to the point it could somewhat compete against the other ki. But this process was extremely slow. He had to make his ki denser and watch out that he doesn't expand too quickly. After 3 weeks, he was now on par with the remnant's ki, and slowly but surely, he would be able to have full control over his ki. Of course, it wouldn't mean that he could perfectly manipulate and guide his ki, but that it wouldn't actively destroy his body. After reaching this point, his own ki began to be able to replenish energy automatically. It appeared that with time, this ability would automatically accelerate to the point that it would reach the same level as the remnants. Coupled with meditation, his energy would only skyrocket. With that being said, he was able to place his focus on other things. It was tiring to do the same thing for the last month. He still had to train his body and needed some battle experience. He also figured he could earn some CP in the process. The City Lord offered other methods to gain CP in a form of missions. One could pair up in a group or do it on your own. Missions consisted in extermination, capture, and protect missions. As it seemed that the CE only came after intelligent beings and would let normal wildlife live. Someone had to deal with them in order to make it safer for patrols and the scattered villages. Most people would still live in the villages as the city couldn't accommodate all of them, and most villagers couldn't afford to stay there permanently. Since the CE only attacked every 3 years, only then would they seek protection in the city. There were some villages that would just stay and fight the CE, as the stronger ones were more attracted to greater amount of life force. So, the more populated regions faced an increased amount of attacks. No one knows the reason why they don't attack wildlife, as it was known that their aim was life force. Since they were already bombarded with requests for help, the City Lord decided that it would be the perfect training method for the young prodigies. As Broly went to the mission board, he was greeted with the other Saiyans. They long formed a team with Taro, Aiz, and Aliyah. It seemed after the month time Aliyah and Kana have distanced themselves a bit. Aliyah explained to Broly that it was because Kana wasn't interested in anything other than the training rooms. But Aliyah already had her goals and techniques in mind, which was why she needed more CP. But it was not to learn the technique, but to learn from them. After a few lessons, the City Lord emphasized that one should just use them for references. This was especially true as many techniques were from different races, meaning that their meridians would also more or less differentiate. They were advised to grasp the concept and not how to circulate your energy to create the effect. Even if one learned the same technique, had the same strength and amount of ki, the one who grasped the technique and made it his own would undoubtedly win over someone who didn't. After they talked for a while, the Saiyans were surprised that Broly wanted to join them for a mission, as he had only been seen training in the gravity chamber. They were delighted to be able to guide him in something and immediately agreed. They searched for a fitting first mission. In the end, they decided on a mission with giant bats involved. After they accepted the mission, they were given the information on location and the nearest village. The missions weren't divided in difficulties. Only after deciding on the mission would be more information revealed other than the type of monster and their numbers. If it was on the easier or harder side, was up to luck. Of course, the missions were never too difficult and were generally on the same level. It was made this way, so they wouldn't shy away to go into certain types of environment or type of mission, like capture or protect missions. The Saiyans were clearly more of a fan of extermination missions. With other mission types, the races could get out of their comfort zones and became more adaptable to different scenarios. After sorting out the information, they realized that it was about 6 hours away. Considering how fast they were able to travel, it once again amazed Broly how vast this planet was. After stocking up their supplies, they started flying towards the village just before their destination. After they arrived, they landed in the village. The group showed their badge, which was a type of proof that they belonged to the city, Elpis. They welcomed them wholeheartedly as they were already waiting for a group of the city to help them. They were astonished to see that all of them were just teens, but dismissed it as the city people were generally speaking more powerful than they were. If they knew that those kids in front of them weren't even 10 years old, they would probably be more than just astonished. They were invited for dinner by the chief of the village and were offered a place to stay the night. The group decided to go to the cave where the bats were living in the next morning. In the middle of the night, as the moonlight lightens up the surrounding, a shrill sound rang out in the village. Awoken by the noise, Aze, Taro, and Aaliyah, already more experienced by this kind of events, headed out, only to see two giant bats both 2 meters in height, intending to abduct the livestock. Before the group could dash off into the fight, a door blasted open from where they just came from. Now you have done it. No one interrupts my sleep. Broly came walking out, 2 key spheres in his hand. As soon as he finished his sentence, he threw his spheres right at them. Boom! Boom! With a huge explosion, the giant bats were reduced to ashes. The villagers were shocked at the display. They looked at the young boy who was already walking back inside with a yawn on his face. Chapter 30. Inside the cave. It was dark. No sunshine reached the depths of this cave. On the way deeper, they encountered countless of these bats only to be killed by the group. It seemed to be an easy mission as the beasts were quite weak on their own, but they had numbers on their side. There were countless of these giant blood-suckers. If one of the Saiyans were to be on his own, it would have been tough, but now in a group of 4, they were bulldozing through the cave in the search of the nest of these bats. They were instinctively attracted towards special blood crystals, which they used to enhance their body. The group was ordered to find this crystal and eliminate all the bats inside. They were to bring back the crystals as proof of their success. 2 hours in, they were seeing different bats with 4 wings on their backs. They remembered Broly of the Pokemon Crobat, but it was still no match for them. Another hour passed, and they finally made it to a big hall, deep underground. On the walls were some blood crystals scattered around, but strangely they didn't see a single bat inside. All they could find was a few bones, unknown from what it stemmed from, and a blood trace towards the opposite exit. We should follow the blood trail. Maybe they were killed off by a stronger beast, Aaliyah said in a quiet voice as they observed the surroundings inside. Broly found it funny that she was completely calm during the whole ordeal, but Taro, the self-proclaimed strongest, was quite nervous from the get-go. He seemed to get anxious underground. He was easily started by anything that moved. Quite amusing to see a Saiyan, the warrior race, shout out because of a little rat. I think we should just pick up a blood crystal and dash. And leave? The village has problems with the bats. That's why they asked for assistance. The bats were probably chased out because of whatever is deeper inside. We have to kill it, so it will be safer for them. We can't leave just because we fulfill the mission's condition. We have to be through and through with this, or there will be bad consequences. Aaliyah rebuked as she was more out to help the villagers than complete the mission, uncommon for normal Saiyans, but Broly figured that the new generation would handle their business quite different in the future. Let's first follow the blood trails, suppress your ki. We will first check out what we deal with and then decide our future moves. So, for now be quiet. Aze was quite solemn, still being vigilantly about the surroundings as he moved towards the blood trails. Affected by the mood, Aaliyah and Taro stopped arguing and put on a more serious face. They followed Aze, who was leading them through the exit. For half an hour they moved through the 5-meter-high tunnels. After some time, they started to hear something snoring, moving closer to the end of the tunnel, which was shining in a red hue. The closer they got, the heavier the stench of blood was. The step through the exit, their eyes adjusted to the light after more than 3 hours of darkness. Naturally, they still used their key sense, so they had a general idea what was inside. Lying on the ground in the center of the hall was a 4-meter-tall giant humanoid. Looking like the mythical creature, a minotaur. As if it was waiting for them, it jumped up, looking towards the group with bloodshot eyes. His mouth and large parts of his body were covered in blood, evidently from the countless corpses of the bats around him. Behind him was a river. It also gained a deep red color through the bodies. The group started spreading out, trying to surround it. Taro and Aze ran to the left side and Aaliyah to the right. Broly dashed towards the minotaur straight ahead. The others shot ki blasts towards the minotaur from the sides, but it just tanked through it, only having Broly in his eyes. They both punched out, colliding with each other. The ground was crushed by the shockwave generated, while Broly was throwing back to the entrance. Before it could follow him up with anything, Aaliyah was already above it, dropping on it with an axe kick, hitting it straight on the top of his head. She stomped hard on the head again, jumping away from the approaching hand. The Minotaur barely turned around as 2 ki beams headed towards it from 2 different directions. The Minotaur blocked the beam with his 2 arms as it growled, clearly angry on the joint attack. Suddenly, it was sent flying towards the river, but it didn't land in it, but instead shot towards the 20-meter-high ceiling, as Broly appeared under it, kicking it upwards. Broly but both of his arms upwards as he charged up his ki in his hands. The Minotaur was embedded inside the ceiling. It struggled to get out, but as soon as he pulled out his head, it was struck with a fierce green beam, pushing it even deeper into the ceiling. Broly exhaled deeply, but he knew not to drop his guard. He believed the attack should be enough for this beast, but it was common to die when one dropped their guard. He waited for the possibility that it would crawl out. Taro already started boasting. The brighter and more spacious environment seemed to have improved his mood. Ha ha ha, way too easy. It couldn't even resist. You idiot. Stop raising flags. Broly shouted at him. With a rumble, the Minotaur abruptly shot out of the hole to the ground. Ah, great. Let me guess, you are even stronger now? As if on cue, the Minotaur started to give off a tremendous amount of ki. A red flame-like aura surrounded it. Its muscle mass increased even further and its horns began to grow. With a deep growl, it started to dash towards Broly, who watched it approach with a wry smile. With every step the ground trembled and slightly gave in as it accelerated. A few meters away it leaped up, then crashed towards Broly with a punch. Well, here goes nothing. Chapter 31. Mission complete. Broly evaded the punch with a jump, but as soon as he was in the air, the Minotaur opened his mouth gathering ki in front of it, before shooting it out. The beam was too fast to dodge. Broly could only cross his arms to block the attack. With the impact, Broly was sent flying towards the ceiling above the entrance they came from. He was already embedded deep into the ceiling, but the Minotaur still shot out his beam, determined to end Broly right then and there. But before he could do so, it was greeted with 3 different ki blasts. Of course, they couldn't just let him do as he pleases. Taro and Aiz rushed at the Minotaur, exchanging dozens of blows, as Aaliyah charged up her crushing sphere. Her speed in making this sphere substantially increased. The City Lord's lesson really paid off, as she could now charge her attack up more efficiently with an additional increase of strength. She threw her crushing sphere as soon as it reached its optimum state. Although her speed has increased tremendously, the boys were already beaten up at the time she sent it out. The Minotaur was just too strong and huge. It used its height difference to completely pummel them before they could even come close to its body. The Minotaur saw the sphere and instinctively sensed the danger from it, so he put all his effort in defending against it. He welcomed the sphere with his 2 arms, as it was slowly pushed towards the collapsed entrance. Just a few meters away, a figure came rushing out off the debris with a ki sphere in his hand. Have a taste of this. Eraser cannon. Broly threw his sphere at the back of the Minotaur. Sandwiched between the spheres, it tried to struggle itself out of the way, but just before it succeeded, Taro and Aiz sent a ki beam from each side, completely surrounding the Minotaur. With a last howl, the Minotaur was reduced to ashes as the ki erupted. The shockwave was no joke underground. It sent the 4 young Saiyans crashing into the cave walls. The dust slowly settled as a voice sounded out. This time it is dead for sure, right? Taro asked with a small chuckle. You bastard, after I crawl out of this hole, I will beat you up. Broly swore at him. After 2 hours, they recovered most of their wounds and were mostly able to move around. They had healing capsules made of the Fruit of Might, but unlike the fruit itself, it didn't have the same instant regeneration. It only accelerated one's natural healing capabilities. As Broly stepped back into the hall, he saw the devastated cave resulted by their battle. The hall they were in was expanded by quite a bit, and the river flowed towards the center of the pit on the ground. Broly saw the others step out of their respected holes. Even after recovering for 2 hours, they still drew deep breaths. They were still exhausted to the extreme after the fierce fight they just had. The Minotaur they just fought had an incredible high tenacity. Without Broly, they would have likely died against that Minotaur, although they thought themselves as quite experienced in missions. This made them realize that right now even a random mission could end their life if they weren't alert enough or overconfident in their abilities. Now, after the cave entrance collapsed, they had to find another way out. Since there were only 2 ways, one was the used-to-be entrance and the other was swimming upwards the river. Without other choices, they began to swim the river upstream. After an hour, they reached a small pond created by a 20-meter-high waterfall. There was a small area to the side of the pond with a hole on a wall, and what seemed to be the exit a few meters next to it. Hey guys, come here. Look what I have found. Taro shouted after he entered the hole in the wall. They flew towards him, and as soon as they entered, a bright red light shone at them. It was a gigantic blood crystal, a 3 meters tall crystal. Besides that, there were scratches on the walls and other marks that pointed to the possibilities that the Minotaur used to live here. The place was giving off a heavy stench of blood as well. Tice underlined that thought, considering the previous living conditions with the bats' corpses. It was clearly the living place of the Minotaur. They wondered why it slept way down the river. Was it frightened away? Let's take it with us and let's go to the village. Stay another night there, Aaliyah said as she closed her nose with 2 fingers. Agreed. Sure. Aiz carried the crystal on his back as they moved out of the underground pond with the exit not far from the Minotaur's lair. After they left, a black creature unnoticeably came out of the water and flew into the waterfall. Only an hour later the group emerged at the side of a mountain. After orientating themselves with their map, they flew towards the village to spend another night there. Arriving at the chief's place, they first took a bath before dropping into their beds. The others immediately fell asleep. Broly, however, used the time to meditate for a moment. He was inching closer to his full control. Even now, the amount of his SLs tremendously increased over the past month. In the morning of the next day, they said their goodbyes to the chief before flying back towards Elpis in only 4 hours. After their battle against the Minotaur, they all received a Zenkai boost, giving them a leap in their strength. Arriving in Elpis, they headed straight towards the reception who received completed missions. It was not in the City Lord's palace, but at a public mission center, where would usually hand over their missions as well. The crowd stared at the young group and the gigantic red crystal they carried with them. They began discussing the group in a hushed voice. Isn't that the champion? It is the first time seeing him out. Yeah, you are right. But more importantly, what is with this absurd blood crystal? I never heard of blood crystals, bigger than half a meter. The receptionist accepted the complete mission, but only took a tiny part of the blood crystal. They were advised to bring it to the leader of the mission center, as he would handle the more extraordinary finds. Chapter 32. Origin Crystal. The leader of the mission center gawked after he analyzed it. In a hurry he left, saying he wasn't qualified to handle this. He reported this to the city lord. After a minute or two, the city lord arrived. Appraising the blood crystal. Unbelievable. Master. The Saiyans called out. Although Broly first felt odd to call someone master, but over the month and the tens of consultation he had, it became a natural thing. In those consultation sessions, Broly quickly came to realize that the city lord was nearly obsessed with gaining knowledge, as he asked Broly about every detail of his process. Of course, Broly gained tremendously through those interactions, especially about micro-adjustments of ki. Where did you find this? We were doing a mission near the Geldo village. Giant bats were attacking the village, and they requested the city to exterminate them. We found it deep inside a cave, where the bats nested. Ace answered for the group. Ace recounted the events from beginning to the end. I see. You guys really found a rarity. What is it, master? Taro nearly screamed out. Cough. It appears to be a mother blood crystal. Mother blood? Have you heard of the origin crystals? Seeing them shake their heads, he continued. Well, you are no natives after all. I also only learned it after I became the city lord. There is an ancient legend about 3 origin crystals. Origin's blood crystal, Origin's spirit crystal, and the Origin's energy crystal. They were the 3 cornerstones of this planet and sky, maintaining order and letting the species on it flourish. After eons of prosperity and bliss, waves of blue bright light appeared in the sky, but before the light could reach the ground, the 3 origin crystals shone in their respected hue and the planet moved towards an unknown location. Supposedly it is where we currently are. Through moving the planet away, the crystals lost their luster and shattered into countless fragments. Some of these fragments contained a fraction of the might of the origin crystal they stemmed from. Those fragments were called mother crystals. With it, even weaker races could gain tremendous power and sometimes give birth to abilities, hence the name. The ability usually corresponds to which crystals one consumed. One can consume the crystals? Taro's eyes were practically shining at this point. Of course, the others were equally excitement, if what was said is true. Yes, it is commonly known that one cannot consume crystals, but this is only accurate for crystals that don't hold any power in them. You guys should consume this mother crystal as soon as possible. After the word gets out that the race, which joined just recently, obtained this kind of treasure, it will cause chaos. Considering the size, it should be more than enough for the 4 of you. Broly saw that the city lord was quite eager to see them use it, but he himself seemed to have no desire for it himself. If it was really a miraculous item as he said, why wouldn't he want it? Master, don't you want to have it? The city lord looked at Broly while raising an eyebrow before chuckling. Indeed, but don't worry, I will only take a tiny amount, for studies purposes. It is indeed a great item, to boost one's power, but it is also said that the younger the consumer is the more effective it is. I believe it has something to do with a young body being easier influenced than older ones. Besides, it was you who lucked upon it. Some things are just meant to be. The city lord then described to them how to absorb the power inside, accordingly to how it was passed on. After a quick consultation with Daz and the other leaders, they decided to let the group of 4 and Kana absorb as much as they could before giving what would be left to the city lord to preserve it. Although Broly disliked Kana, he agreed in the end, as the race would be better off if they had more strong warriors and Kana was still a talented child in the end. Broly was determined to give her good beating if her attitude worsened. On the next day in a trainings room, all 5 of them were standing in front of the giant crystal. They were cutting their palms open and moved their ki into the blood before pressing their palms onto the crystal, guiding the power inside into their palm while circulating their ki in an unusual manner. They felt the crystal slightly tremble as warmth flowed inside their body through their palms. After a few minutes, one by one was letting go, and sat down to break down the power inside their body. Broly only let go after half an hour. He was the last one to let go. He sat down trying to absorb the power. As he was circulating the power, he realized that his cells were trembling in excitement. Every cell was slowly filled to the brim. Broly watched on with his inner eye as the cells were radiating with power, but this wasn't the extent of the power of the Origin's blood. His muscles, skin, and bones became denser and tougher. He could feel how his body was strengthening at a visible pace. Even his organs were getting stronger by the minute. This was how he felt when he consumed the fruit of might, just that this far exceeded the intensity of the fruit. He still could get numerous of fruits, but he sensed that the fruits were forcefully increasing one's life force. It would be harmful to take too many of them. That was also one of the reasons the City Lord used special capsules made out of the fruits, instead of directly eating it, for the tournament. Comparing it to the crystal was like comparing earth and heaven. Although the effects were far greater than the fruit, it wasn't even close as forceful as the fruit. Rather, it complemented the body. As time passed, Broly felt as if a burden was lifted off his shoulder. His body was feeling particularly relaxed, as if years of tension was finally dissipating. He realized that his body was way more under stress than he previously thought. As this feeling was omnipresent since birth, he attributed it towards the Saiyan body before getting used to it. But now he knew it was caused by the imbalance of his body and ki. He was extremely happy seeing this. Instead of increasing the amount of life force, this crystal used the energy to elevate the cells themselves to a higher level. It was a qualitative change, giving him much more leeway in the future with his increasing ki. Similar to S cells, they gave off an intimidating pressure, but it was a soothing kind filled with vitality and not the dominating pressure the S cells emitted. After an hour, most of the power was deeply ingrained in Broly's cells, until he felt a strange feeling built up inside him. Chapter 33. New Ability. This feeling became more and more prominent. It started in Broly's center before spreading into all his cells, organs, blood, skin, and bones. He was aware of everything that happened inside his body. This is. An idea flashed in his mind. He immediately concentrated on his center, perceiving the changes inside. And there it was. Life force. Pure life force generating in the center in abundance, before spreading throughout his body. A new source. A source of life force supplying Broly with pure energy. It is even a bit higher than the amount of ki I generate. That means, this completely nullifies my problems. With the surplus, I even should be able to accelerate my regeneration. Well, that would only be possible if I can guide the energy. Even if I can't, it will make me live low. Life force is different from ki. Although every living being has it, it is not something one can easily control. Although Goku was able to create a Genkidama through life force, it was through the willingness of sentient beings to share their energy, enabling Goku to gather their energy with a technique. A technique created by a deity, the North Kai, only able to be used by pure-hearted people. As Broly sensed something, he opened his eyes and looked at his palm, before he raised it to his mouth and bit down between his finger and thumb. Blood dripped down his chin, while he looked at his wound. He tried to grasp the life force and guide it to his wound. His eyes widened as he felt the life force obediently flow according to his will, healing his wound. Although it wasn't as exaggerated as a Namekian's ability to regrow a limp or bruise near a mortal body, but it wasn't slow by any means. Broly's regenerative abilities nearly tripled with the support of life force. If he accumulates his life force, this amount would even increase. Not only did this crystal give me incredible strength, making my body evolve to a whole new level and solved my predicament, but it also blessed me with a life-saving technique. Ha 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 ha. Broly laughed out with a near maniacal laugh, startling the others. The others seemed to have already finished absorbing this miraculous power. As they were reveling their increase in power, they were awoken by Broly's laugh. They looked at him, who had his head down looking at his palm. After a while, his laugh ceased before he looked at them with a smile on his face. Before he could say anything, Aiz was falling to his knees, sweating profusely, followed with Kana, who stumbled backwards to the ground with a panic-stricken face. Only Taro and Aaliyah were left standing with their legs shaking. It was the same for all Saiyans in this room. They knew who they looked at, but they couldn't help but feel fear strike their hearts as they looked into his now yellow eyes. It was a fear born from their most primitive instinct. They couldn't help it. The weaker ones already collapsed, with only the stronger ones being able to stand. This only lasted for a second before Broly's eyes reverted to his normal black eyes, but it felt like hours for the four young Saiyans. Broly was shocked as well, but only partly because of their reaction. In the moment he looked up, his life force seemed to flare up as he looked at the white glistering lights flashing inside the bodies of the other people. He could see their life force, but it didn't stop there. He realized by concentrating he could not only see it, but also sense his surroundings. To be precise, he could sense every living being in his near periphery. For a second, a whole new perspective seemed to open up for him. A new side of the universe which was previously in the dark was now shining like a beacon right at him. Awoken by the panting in front of him, he regained his focus. "Are you all right?" he asked the heavily breathing Saiyans on the ground. "Fuck me. What the hell was that?" Taro started cursing as he fell on his butt, still looking at Broly. "I don't know. Broly, did you gain an ability?" the city lord asked. He was confused by what happened, as he couldn't sense anything for them to be so frightened. Yes, I did." "Well, if you didn't, I don't think anybody could." Aaliyah threw in after she regained her bearings. Why? You didn't notice? You sucked the crystal completely dry." Broly's eyes widened as he heard that. He looked at where the crystal was previously at, only to find a heap of dust. Before they started absorbing the energy, the city lord made an accurate analysis of how many people could absorb from it. The outcome was around 12 people, which meant that Broly took in 8 people's worth of power. Cough. "I think you guys should first get some rest. Have your body adapt to the changes before starting to train again. Broly, I hope you could share some information about your ability later." Cough. "Now go rest." Broly didn't miss the glint in the city lord's eyes, showing his obsessive side again after he discovered something new. Broly felt like the city lord was looking at him like a mystery box, not able to wait to discover new things. "Yes, master," the kid shouted, before heading out. Broly saw Kana at the door looking at him. Before heading out, Broly exchanged some words with Aaliyah, Taro, and Ace, inquiring if they gained anything from the crystal. Unexpectedly, Taro seemed to have gained an ability. He said that he didn't know what it is exactly, but he knew that it would give him tremendous power. Aaliyah and Ace got an immense increase in strength, but they couldn't help but be a bit dejected about not gaining a special ability. A few days later, Broly was standing inside the city lord's office. "So, what is my ability? I thought one would only gain one ability. After what you have recounted, it is clear that you gained the ability to generate life force. But the other abilities aren't abilities that you got, but side effects." Side effects? Being able to generate life force gives you an extremely high affinity to life force, maybe even the highest possible. With that, you didn't even need to learn how to manipulate it. It just came natural to you now. You should be able to discover other uses of life force in the future. Of course, that is only speculation on my side. But why were the others so frightened? They only said that they felt fear, but couldn't describe why. I thought it had to do with my life force, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Chapter 34. Attack. It has been a year since they came back from Elpis. In the last 10 years, Violet and her parents would make a week-long travel towards the city when the time for the CE to attack comes. Violet was already used to this kind of event, but rather than feeling afraid of the attacks, she looked forward to visiting Elpis again. Besides, her parents showered her with love, making their escape feel like a holiday trip. The city helped her reduce her initial anxiousness as well. The city is always lively, and there were many different species she would never encounter in the village. It was a thrilling experience whenever she visited, seeing all the flying cars, screens, and the other high-end technology. Her eyes were sparkling every time she visited, but what awed her the most were the people soaring the skies. The strong individuals who were protecting them when they sought shelter. She admired them from afar, as they patrolled the city walls in their uniform. Today she turned 16. All her friends and family gathered together and celebrated with a feast and lots of gifts. It was a very small village with barely a few hundred people in it, which resulted in almost everyone knowing each other. In the evening, she went out with her friends into the nearby woods to have a small party. She wore a short dress. The top part was in a bright red which crumbled into the white bottom part. It complemented her light bluish skin and dark violet hair, giving her a lively feel. Although she was young, she looked like a young woman. Her long legs and her already developed assets were attracting the boys' gazes. Needless to say that she was popular among the male villagers. She would be lying if she said that she didn't enjoy the attention, but since she was a child, she knew what she wanted. To work and live in her race's headquarters in the city, but this was a distant dream. Only the strongest or smartest were allowed to live within the walls of the city. This was a restriction made from the city, to only have people able to contribute to society. She knew that. She wasn't smart enough to get in. So she trained almost every day. After hearing that one of her races made it in and accomplished astonishing feats. Her race, Lycan, reached adulthood early on at the age of 16 and wouldn't change in appearance until they were 500 years old. They lived long lives, up to 1,000 years. They were admired for their beauty and envied by their long lifespan, but they didn't excel in other areas. Weren't it for their long lifespan and accumulated knowledge, they probably wouldn't even be able to have a stand inside the city, the place Violet worked to get in. Today she was as determined as ever. She wanted to have a little party before applying for a job in the city, now that she officially became an adult. Although her parents were reluctant to send her to the city, but since she was already considered an adult, they supported her in the end. But tonight was time to relax and enjoy the night. After a few hours, the party came to an end. most going back home. Only a friend who courted her in the past was left with her. They went to the village before separating towards their home and going to sleep. This was what was supposed to happen. This should have been a normal day, like any other. Her mind was blank as she stood a few hundred meters away from her village. She saw her village burn with an occasional CE roaring out. "We have to leave," the friend of her screamed, shaking her to try to bring her out of daze. Suddenly a CE showed up from the village, looking at them, apparently attracted by the scream. It started going into a full sprint towards them. Her friend screamed out in panic before running away, leaving Violet behind. This attracted the monster even further, ignoring the frozen Violet, heading straight at her friend. Pulling herself out of daze, she headed straight at the village. "Mom! Dad!" She screamed as she ran through the empty streets, until a familiar figure caught her attention. Her father with only one arm was staring at her before sprinting at her. She broke into tears, seeing her father still alive. She wanted to hug him, but he just grabbed her arm with his remaining arm before fleeing towards the shadow of a building. Seeing his pain-filled face, she realized something. "Dad, where is Mom?" He gritted his teeth before tears flowed down his cheek. His silence confirmed her fear. She couldn't help breaking out in tears while hugging his father. Her father wiped away the tears on her crying face as he looked at her before whispering, "Pshhh, sweetie, it is all right. Sweetie, look at me. I know it is hard, but you have to listen to me. You have to run to Elpis. Tell them what happened. You have to warn them. You have to tell them that the CE is already attacking. Why me? Why you are coming with me? You can tell them." He looked at her with a saddened smile. "It is weak from here. I have already lost too much blood. You have to be strong. You hear me? Stay strong. I am glad that I could see you one last time." He gave her a kiss on the forehead, hugging her tight. "Now go. Remember, head east. Don't stop. Don't look back." He hurried her. In the background, he could hear them approach. We can still make it. I'm strong. I can dash." Before she could continue, a black giant shadow appeared near them on the street.
No.
"Listen to your old pa one last time. Okay? Everything will be all right. I love you." He then pushed her deeper into the shadows before running out on the street. "Hey, you ugly beast, come and get me if you can," screamed at him before running in the opposite direction. The CE, provoked, ran after him.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry."
Violet silently cried as she ran out of the village. Without stopping, without looking back, she ran. For days, until she collapsed to the ground near a river out of exhaustion. "Mom, Dad," she mumbled before falling asleep. Chapter 35. Rescue. A week later, Aaliyah, Ace, Taro, and Broly went for another mission. This time it was a simple investigation mission to the west. There were some reports about disappearing people. Usually they were stronger individuals with plenty of experience. After their increase, they wanted to adapt to their power, but unfortunately it turned out to be investigation. Maybe the city lord arranged that way, so they would take a longer rest. Although they were unsatisfied with the type of mission they got, they still carried on. They went to the village that made the last report and have them tell about the missing persons routine. They followed the instructions from the villagers and soon found a few markings of scratches. Varying in sizes and depths, the footprints were also all different. This didn't tell Broly anything, but the others were more familiar with those hints. "Maybe it is the CE?" Taro said aloud. As they flew further west, and with it the markings became more obvious. "Don't be ridiculous. They only appear on full moon. It is still 2 years until that. There is no way they would show up now." Ace immediately retorted. "What else could it be? That number of varying creatures of different shapes in a singular spot. Only the stronger ones disappeared, meaning only those with stronger life force, which should be their scouts to test the waters before they go on a full-on assault." Obviously points at the CE. "Ace, you said they only appear in full moon?" Broly inquired. "HM? Yes, they do. Pretty much every time they start their attack, it is on a full moon. Since we only have a full moon every 3 years, they only attack then, and with the moon they retract their forces." "Wait, has that something to do with your tails being removed?" "Tails? I know about that." Aaliyah suddenly chimed in, seemingly eager to show of her knowledge. "My father told me that we have to cut off our tails before the full moon comes out. It takes some time before they regrow, so every few years we have to cut it off. Apparently, the CE completely lose it when they see one with a tail. They will prioritize you and will not cease until one is dead. In addition, it is said that we can transform into giant apes. Most Saiyans are not able to remain conscious in that state, making one an even easier target, so the higher-up decided to cut it off. They prioritize those with tails? Or are they prioritizing Saiyans? It seems they prioritize Saiyans, since Dracos still keep their tails. Weird. Even after I am able to sense life force, it doesn't appear that Saiyans contain different life force than others. The tail only seemed to have a greater amount of life force, but that should be it. So, What have tails to do with them being able to sense Saiyans? If they can sense life force, wouldn't they recognize Saiyans even if they cut off their tails? Unless a Saiyan loses something with the tail, and they don't actually sense the life force in the tail but something else? As they were flying over a small river, Broly discovered what appears to be bloody figure. Guys, I think I discovered something. Without waiting, he flew down, landing a few tens of meters away from the figure. He scanned the area, trying to sense any other life force or key signature in the vicinity, indicating an ambush. After he didn't sense anybody, he directed his focus on the figure. He realized that the life force was a bit on the low side. He quickly approached what appears to be a young woman. He stabilized her before feeding her a healing capsule. By then the others were already landing near him. After seeing him heal her, they went out to secure the area. It would take a while for her to recover. It wouldn't be wise to move her now and risk to worsen her injuries. Although Broly realized that her dress was not drenched in blood, but just that this was the color of it, he still didn't want to risk anything, so they waited for her to wake up. After an hour and 2 capsules, she finally woke up. Her eyes felt heavy as she tried to open them. After struggling for a minute, she finally could see a stranger who was crouching next to her. After the initial shock, she saw the badge at his belt indicating that he was from Elpis. She looked down at her body, seeing the dirted and ragged dress that she wore. She remembered what happened. She remembered her village burn. She remembered her father sacrificing himself for her. She broke out in tears as she threw herself at the stranger, crying in his arms. Seeing the woman cry in his arm, he knew that she had been through much to accumulate so much pain that she would throw herself at a stranger. She was obviously traumatized by the events. Can you tell me what happened? He tried to ask in the gentlest voice he could manage.
Ce.
In between her sobbing and mumbling, he recognized the word CE. Without waiting, he picked her up princess style. Before commanding the others, "We are going back. Now." Although he wasn't the official leader, but he was still the strongest and they could read the seriousness in his voice, so without hesitation they followed his orders. It didn't take long until the woman cried herself to sleep again, while they were flying. After a few hours, they arrived at the city lord's infirmary. They went to the city lord and reported what they have seen and what Broly believed to have heard the woman say. "All right, I will inform the defense. Broly, stay with the woman until she wakes up. She may calm down easier after seeing you again. Inform me through your badge. The other 3 of you should go back and tell your leader to meet me in the city hall as soon as possible." Understood. Shortly, the heads of the various races were assembled before they decided to call their people back. If this news was correct, they had to prepare themselves. But before they take further actions, they wanted to wait until the woman wake up. Broly was sitting next to her bed meditating. Over the time, the process of taking over control accelerated. The weaker the remnant's ki got, the stronger and faster he got. He was close to having full control. After a day, she woke up, seeing the stranger again, sitting cross-legged on the table with his eyes closed. She let out a relieved sigh before it hit her again, remembering the last few days which felt like a horrible nightmare to her. She was close to the tears again before her train of thought was interrupted. A green pulse started radiating from the stranger. The pressure kept growing stronger, threatening to crush her until she let out a pain-filled groan.